Hey everyone, welcome to Norfork Lake. We're here in, I guess you would say northern Arkansas. I mean, almost straddling the Missouri line. I mean, Lake Norfork's one of those lakes that is super clean, beautiful lake. I would say one of the smaller lakes in what I would consider north central Arkansas. Kind of straddles the Missouri-Arkansas line. I feel like I remember fishing at least 3 or 4 Bassmaster Opens here over the years. We had an Elite Series event here in 2016. When you look at the breakdown of this lake, I mean, it's really just kind of a smaller table rock or a smaller bull shoals. You can actually spend your tournament day and fish, you know, both ends of the lake. It's got all 3 species, smallmouth, spotted bass, and largemouth. And being able to come here and fishing for all 3 species is cool. The thing about Norfork, it's only about 22,000 surface acres, 550 miles of shorelines. You've got basically 3 major rivers or creeks. You've got the Norfork River, you've got the Bennett's River, and then down by the dam, you've actually got Big Creek. I mean, it can almost be treated as a small river itself. I mean, this is another one of those lakes that fluctuates dramatically. It's a highland type reservoir, so I mean, it can fluctuate up to 30 feet. You've got a lot of shoreline cover, buckbrush, laydowns, a lot of rocks, bluffs, you've got clay points, you've got gravel points. Boat docks are very limited on this lake. When it comes to the forage in Norfork Lake, I mean, this is a typical highland reservoir. I mean, ton of crawfish, and you've got perch, you've got crappie, you've got threadfin shad, gizzard shad, and then you've got just, you know, your typical minnows. I mean, shore minnows and chubs and different types of minnows. There's a lot of forage for these fish to feed on. Really, you can come to Norfork and pretty much fish anything you want to fish. So whether you're coming to Norfork, you know, as a family vacation, tournament fishing, the thing about it is there's lots of opportunities as far as places to stay. Mountain Home is literally 8 or 10 minutes down the road. I mean, you know, modern motels, lots of great places to eat. And then you look around the lake itself and there's some of those rustic type resorts, core operated camping areas, parks. Some of them are fully improved with full hookups. When it comes to access on this lake, you've got access really from end to end. I mean, there's access points down by the dam. There's access points, you know, here, right here in the middle of the lake. We're here at Panther Creek. And I mean, this is probably one of the most popular areas. It's close to town. It's, you know, within reach of pretty much anything around the lake. But if you're staying off in a VRBO or something like that, I mean, way up in other ends of the lake, you've got Cranfield area that has a ramp. You've got the Red Bank area way up the North Fork River. And then there's 5 or 6 accesses up the Bennett's Arm. So definitely plenty of accesses regardless of where you're staying on the lake. So when we really dive into it and we start talking pre-spawn, one of the biggest things that I think about here in the Ozarks, I mean, any of these highland reservoirs, if for any reason we have had any spring rains, I'm definitely gonna look in the backs of creeks, in the backs of river arms. When you start looking at the midsection of the lake, one of the things that I wanna do is I wanna find a couple of creeks that got a fairly major creek channel that winds and bends around. I like creek channels that don't just run straight into a pocket necessarily. I like to find these creeks that have creek channels that meander around. And the reason I like that is it creates a lot of places to basically know these pre-spawn fish are gonna set up. I mean, when you start looking at this, you hear us talk about transitions. You hear us talking about corners, points, channel swings. Those things all come into play when you start talking about pre-spawn. Because what happens is through the winter, these fish have basically lived out in the creek channel, chasing bait. And as that water temperature starts warming, the days get longer, they're just gonna migrate to these transition areas where you've got a channel bend that swings up against a bluff and then flows into a transition area. You're gonna have changes, rock changes. You're gonna see it go from ledge rock to broken up rock to potentially gravel or clay. So these areas like this, these points are gonna be a big player when it comes to pre-spawn fishing, where these fish are gonna really start to pull up and feed up before they go to that spawning mode. So one of the things that I really like to focus on, especially during that pre-spawn period, if I'm gonna be up one of the river arms, you've really got to treat this river like a creek. And the thing that I want to do is I really want to focus wherever that creek channel swings the closest to the mouths of pockets. So like I said, you know, this place, you've got the creek channel swinging right up against here. This would be another really key pre-spawn creek. You've got the major creek channel swinging right in front of the mouth of this, and then you've got all these drains that come out of this pocket. So those would be extremely important pre-spawn places to check. You don't necessarily want to fish these big, long, flat pockets that don't have a channel leading into them. So in essence, this would be a key pre-spawn place. So when we're talking pre-spawn, I mean, one of the baits that I'm 100% gonna have on Norfork Lake when I show up here in the spring is going to be a crankbait. You know, something that will dive in the 9 to 14 foot range, something that'll dive in the 8 to 10 foot range. Then I'm gonna have baits that are, you know, 4 to 8 foot deep. And then I'm gonna have baits that are different colors for, you know, the occasion that I'm fishing them in. Not saying you'll never catch fish suspended on them, but I'm trying to make contact with the bottom. I'm gonna be fishing those transition areas. Those are the kind of places that I'm gonna really focus, especially on a lake like Norfork that's got relatively clear water. I like a matte finished bait. I mean, this is actually a RK55DD that is a Bass Pro exclusive color, and it's a matte finish. It looks really natural. Another key in the spring is red. Something about red that just makes them mad, and they will swim a long ways to get a red bait. And then when I talk about, you know, situational stuff, as you get closer to the spawn, that is when a bait like this little 50 comes into play. Something that's more brim colored. And then when you get into those dirtier water situations, something that's a little bit more opaque is definitely the way I want to go. One of the first baits that I am going to be looking at using in the pre-spawn period is going to be a jerkbait. One of the biggest things that, you know, you want to make sure is that you've got the right jerkbait for the right occasion. I mean, this is the McDart. This bait here will only dive like 3 to 5 feet deep. Then you've got the 110, just the original McStick 110. This bait is going to get down to that 8, 10, 12 foot range depending on how you fish it. The beauty of jerkbait fishing in the spring, pre-spawn especially, is you literally can catch fish anywhere in the water column or in the lake on a jerkbait. The other thing that's cool about jerkbait fishing in the spring, color will honestly make a difference in what species you catch. If I'm throwing a real flat bait, something that doesn't have a lot of color, I catch more largemouth. Switch to a bait that's got a lot of color, that's when the smallmouth start firing. So remember that when you start picking colors and picking the bait you want to throw in the pre-spawn, color does make a difference, not just for watercolor, but what species of bass you're going to catch. Digging deeper into pre-spawn, you got to have a jig. This happens to be a 1/2 ounce Big Bite McMoney jig. So these are baits that I'm going to throw when those fish aren't quite as aggressive. The jig is typically a bait that I'm going to fish, you know, on channel swings. I'm going to fish it on points. I'm going to fish it around cover. You don't necessarily want a trailer that's got a lot of action. I like a trailer that's more like a chunk style trailer. When the fish are really feeding on bait, you don't think they're feeding on crawfish, that's when a little swimmer, something, you know, like a 2.8, 2.9 swimmer on a 1/4, 3/8 ounce head. When those fish are on bait, that's when that swim bait really comes into play in the pre-spawn period. And probably one of my favorite ways to catch a bass in a pre-spawn is a spinnerbait, especially on a lake like Norfork here. When you have those situations where you get that runoff, you get some colored water, the water gets up in the bushes, the buckbrush, around the laydowns in the trees, you've got to have a spinnerbait. Generally, when the water's colder, I like a little 3/8, 5/16 ounce with a Colorado, Indiana combination, something like that, turtleback blade, something that I can slow roll around that brush. Okay, now that we've got through the actual pre-spawn period, I mean, you're gonna go right into the spawn. And one thing about it on these lakes here in the Ozarks, these fish are gonna spawn a broad range of the year unless we just really warm up and it just stays totally consistent. So the biggest thing about it during the spawn is you've got to remember somewhere on this lake they're going to be spawning, but there may be fish in the pre-spawn mode and there may be fish that are done spawning. But when you're in the spawning mode, you know, we talked about pre-spawn and where these fish are at and what they're doing. I mean, essentially back here in Cranfield again, you look at where these fish are migrating, you know, up and down this creek channel. What these fish are eventually going to do is they're going to slide into these drains, into these flatter pockets, and they're going to migrate up and they're going to start spawning, you know, on a lot of these flatter areas. I mean, you can see I've got my Garmin mapping shaded. So, you know, typically anything that I've got shaded in orange is going to be prime spawning type area. But when you broaden back out and you look at this lake as a whole during the spawn, you've got opportunities like that throughout every region of this lake. All of these short pockets are all what you would consider to be spawning type pockets from end to end on this lake. Just remember, when you're fishing these Ozark lakes, don't always think that every bass is going to spawn way back here in this flat stuff. A lot of times these fish will literally spawn on these steeper sections as long as you've got the right rock. If you've got a bluff wall or a bluff bank, ledgy type rock that has gravel falling on ledges, those fish will spawn right there on those ledges. So definitely keep that in mind when you're fishing these types of lakes. If you want to go fish some dirtier water, that's when you want to focus on the river arms of this lake. And to me, I mean, the North Fork is the biggest, the most prevalent. I mean, you want to get up here in the North Fork, you're going to find dirtier water. You're not going to have to sight fish for these fish. And I mean, it's really just so obvious where these fish are going to be once you get up here and really tighten things up. Any place that you have these channel bends, these transition flats. The other thing about this area up here is you're gonna have a lot of laydowns, you're gonna have bushes, you're gonna have a lot more cover to fish in the water. These fish typically will spawn for generally 2, maybe even 3 months. I mean, you might see an early spawn late in March, early in April. Then you're gonna have another wave, usually on the moon in April. May typically is gonna be when the biggest majority of fish spawn. Unless for some reason we just get really warm and really stable, the spawn is gonna carry out for really about 3 months of the year. I guarantee that fish was on a bed. Get on up here, baby. So when it comes to the actual spawning time of the year, and I mentioned it earlier, the spawn is probably my least favorite time to be fishing. I mean, typically when I'm fishing around the spawn on a lake like Norfork, I'm gonna try to find the most off-colored water I can find. But if I'm in that situation where there's just no off-colored water to be found, the thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lighten up. I mean, I'm gonna go with something like, you know, a Nico rig, a wacky rig, something that I can fish in that clear water, make presentations around, you know, places that I feel like those fish are gonna be spawning. The big key is understanding, you know, a lake like this doesn't have a lot of cover. So places like this, behind boat docks, can be real key. On those days that you get some wind, even around the spawn, fish are gonna eat bluegill mimickers. And that's when this little 50 rock crawler is a bait that I'll throw. I know a lot of people say, you know, a crankbait isn't a bait to throw during the spawn, but if the water's a little bit off colored, if you've got good wind and those fish aren't able to see the bait good, a little bitty small profile crankbait like that is a perfect bluegill size morsel for a bass. And then if you start talking about fishing dirtier water situations, one of the baits that I'm always still gonna have is, you know, a 1/2 ounce Big Bite McMoney jig. Typically, I'm still gonna use, you know, a chunk style type trailer on that bait. I'm going to fish that thing around, you know, behind boat docks, around laydowns, in dirtier water for the most part. And if I'm not flipping a jig, just a tube bait. Texas rig tube bait is hard to beat during the spawns. And then when it comes to, you know, really trying to catch some big ones during the spawn, when you have those right condition days, you've got wind blowing, especially in places where, you know, you feel like fish are spawning on steeper type banks, ledgier, bluffier type stuff that's got some gravel, that's when big swim baits can really get it done. A bait like the Spro Chad shad or now this new little guy are gonna be two baits that are definitely gonna be on my deck during the spawn. Post-spawn can be one of the most phenomenal times of the year to fish these lakes if the conditions are right. If the fish have, spawned well, if the shad are spawning. There's so many things that carry into that post-spawn period that can really dictate how good fishing is gonna be. But post-spawn to me is one of those things that you start basically reversing your track. If there's a shad spawn going on, the biggest thing that you wanna do is cover water. And the big thing to me is I'm gonna look at the midsection to the lower end of the lake. Not all the way to the lower end, but mid to lower section of the lake, typically for that shad spawn and the brim and bluegill spawn. And wherever the forage they wanna eat is, that's where they're gonna be when you start talking post-spawn. So now that we're actually out here on the lake talking post-spawn, one of the things that I really want to focus on during the post-spawn is actually kind of trying to get away from those channels. These fish will filter out of these spawning pockets, and a lot of times what I'm looking for is these longer, flatter points, especially if you've got something that's got a good break. I mean, you can see the contours are steeper over here on this side. The thing that this allows you to do is those fish migrate out, they kind of congregate on these flat points. Also, these are the places that those shad are gonna spawn. When they start spawning, they're gonna spawn on these flattest points generally that you can find. So that's a real key focus to the post-spawn. And then you're gonna have brim spawning in these pockets, and that typically is what's gonna keep a lot of the post-spawn fish shallower to catch them in that period of the year. The post-spawn period, there's really kind of two trains of thought in my mind you have to keep in mind. I'm chasing those fish that are especially on a brim type spawn. One of the biggest things that I'm gonna have in my hand is gonna be a popper of some kind. That popper style bait really gets it done. Then when you start talking about the shad spawn, that's when a bait like this, swimmer style bait, something that you can just basically throw to the bank and just burn it off the surface. If that bait is up there spawning, this is a bait that really resembles that. And then if I start seeing fish school out in open water, I'm targeting, fish that are in brush piles or around cover, around the corners of boat docks, that's when a bait like this wake style bait, just something that you can wind on the surface, makes a big wake, a lot of commotion on the surface. These are the kind of baits that I'm gonna fish when those fish are on shad, when they're on, bait, when they're up shallow. When it comes to catching them out deeper though, that's when my train of thought totally changes. I mean, we're talking, 5/8, 3/4 ounce football jigs, generally something that's really bulked up, something that I can, look to get some big bites on. And a lot of times during the post-spawn, when they really start feeding back up, generally you can catch some big ones. Get on up here, look at that fish. I mean, you would almost swear that that fish is a pre-spawn fish, but you can see her tail's healed up. She's just up there feeding on brim and shad, like I said. I mean, these fish are gonna stay so much shallower than you really expect them to. Really probably up until the time the water temperature gets to be in the upper 70s or low 80s. Okay, now that we have got through the post-spawn, you get into that summertime period. I mean, a lot of guys refer to it as the dog days of summer. In all honesty, I mean, yeah, fishing can get tough here on Norfork during the summer, but the fish typically get grouped back up during the summer to a degree. So there's a lot of things that you want to keep in mind when you're fishing that summertime period. Again, typically in the summer, these fish have migrated, a lot of them, out of these creeks. They're all pushing out here toward the main lake. So that is where I'm gonna focus my attention when it comes to summertime, is on the main lake. When you zoom in here, out here on this main lake point right here, this would be a real key section to focus on. You've got a series of underwater bluff. Then you've got this series of this big ridge or islands out here in the lake that create, saddles, they create ridges. You've got a steep drop, but these kind of places is where you want to focus when it comes to fishing offshore in the summer. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is you see when I zoom in here, I've got my depth shading right now out to 24 feet. Once I establish where that thermocline is, that is where I want my outer shade line to be, so I know I'm fishing the contour where the thermocline is at. The other thing about summertime, typically early in the morning, you've got to consider on these clear water lakes like this, you're still going to get bait occasionally that gets up around the surface. There's a lot of topwater things that can open up that time of year, so definitely keep in mind the mid to lower section of the lake during that summer period of the year. So when you finally get through that post-spawn period, when the fish really kind of start slowing down, I mean, summer is still a good time to fish, but one thing about it, you're gonna have to change your tactics when you get into those dog days of summer. Generally, first thing in the morning, you can get by with catching some aggressive fish. Generally in the summer, I just want a smaller walking style bait. Something that I can walk, make a lot of commotion on the surface to catch those fish first thing in the morning. You know, if you have a cloudy day, sometimes that topwater will carry on through the day, but due to the clear water, due to the fact that there's a thermocline that's formed, a lot of those fish are gonna want to spend the majority of their time right around that thermocline. If I'm fishing more vertical type stuff, bluff ends, sharp drops, things of that nature, that's when a drop shot is something you have got to have in hand on lakes like Norfork. I mean, something about purple on these clear water reservoirs that absolutely is a must-have. You know, something like a big bite cliffhanger. Then when you're fishing more of that traditional, you know, long run out stuff down on the very ends of these bluff ends, that's when just a little sensation tube, little 3.5, 3 3/4 inch tube on an open hook, just drug on the bottom out there on that pea gravel chunk rock stuff, there's going to be an opportunity to catch spots and smallmouth on a bait like that. Another bait that I've got to have is a swing head of some kind. This is actually just a gamakatsu 3/8 ounce hybrid swing head. I've got a little creature style bait, a little fighting frog on there, gamakatsu hybrid worm hook. And you just basically are trying to keep that bait in contact with the bottom, fish it out there around the thermocline, and those are definitely baits that I'm gonna have for the dog days of summer. When you start talking about fall, the biggest thing about it is, to me, it is almost that reverse migration that you see happen in the spring to a degree, except the fish have they've been in the creeks. When you start talking fall, these fish have been out on the main lake, so that is when the first thing I would do is run into every one of these major creeks. Really not so much on the lower section, but from the mid to the mouths of the river, I would run into all of these creeks just using my 2D and my down imaging, and you know, every now and then throwing live scope in the water just to find the creeks that the bait are in. I am not gonna waste any time fishing any of these creeks until I find a creek that's got bait. Bait in the fall is gonna take you to the bass. So just be sure that you travel up and down the lake until you find where that bait's going. Another thing in the fall that you can really play on as well is possibly running way up one of these creeks. Typically, you're gonna have dirtier water in the backs of the creeks. It's gonna allow you to fish a little bit differently. I mean, they'll get in some of the skinniest water you can imagine in the fall, and you might catch them out there in 40 or 45 foot of water. So be sure, travel the lake, and again, once you find the bait, you're gonna find the bass.
Stay down there. Ain't nothing wrong with that fish at all. That is the kind that I love to catch.
So when it comes to fall, not only just here on Norfork, but really any of these Ozark highland type reservoirs, I mean, I'd really like to keep it pretty simple. I mean, there's two things that, in my opinion, really make a difference in the fall. And that is, number one, you gotta be around bait, or two, a lot of times crawfish come into play. Probably my #1 go-to choice because of that is gonna be a rock crawler. Generally the 55, the 55DD, the 50DD. These are gonna be baits that I really concentrate on. In the fall though, typically I wanna go more translucent, more natural. I mean, phantom browns, phantom watermelons, colors that are really translucent, especially on these clear water lakes like this. I mean, you can throw it on transition areas, you can throw it on long flat points and just grind that bait back to the boat and have an opportunity to catch a lot of good smallmouth and spotted bass. And then work your way back into the creeks, fishing more channel bends, things like that, and that's where you're gonna run into the largemouth. I mean, that's when you might wanna change to a shad colored bait. And then if I get back in those creeks, way back up in the river arms, and I need something to fish shallower, this little 55 MD is the way to go. This is like a 4 to 8 foot bait. Again, this is like a 9 to 14 foot bait. If the thermocline has broke, those fish can go anywhere. And that's when baits like a buzzing style bait. I love to throw this suicide shad buzzer in the fall. It's a bait that you can cover a ton of water. It's a small profile. Definitely something you want to keep in mind for the fall. Another baits that I'm gonna have for sure, I'm gonna have plopper style baits. I mean, some kind of a plopper style, whether you're fishing lakes that, the forage is smaller. I mean, stuff like this Spro Cyclone, just the XPS plopper. Those are gonna be the baits that you wanna look at. When you don't have that opportunity to catch those fish up on the bank, up there chasing shallower bait. And it may not be that the bait's not shallow, it just may be that the bait's not on the bank. You've got to utilize forward-facing sonar. And the things I'm gonna do, I'm gonna really have 2 different style minnows. I'm gonna have a larger version of just a jerk minnow. And generally when I'm throwing that bait, I'm gonna throw it on the Gamakatsu Horizon head. I want a beefier hook because typically this is a lighter head. This is a bait that I'm gonna throw high in the water column. Whenever I'm seeing bait high in the water column, that's when I'm gonna be throwing this style, minnow style bait, because I'm throwing that bait to the fish and I'm working it through them. I'm shaking it as I come through the fish. I'm trying to get them to follow and react to this. But if I'm not throwing that style bait and the bait is deep and I'm dropping vertically on them, I want to totally switch it up. I want to go to just a round bend, just a big bite swimmer style head, something that's small, finessey, something that I can drop down, get directly to those fish and just sit there and shake it in place. So those are baits that you definitely got to have in hand if you come to Norfork anytime in the fall. All right, guys, it is winter, believe it or not. I mean, it is literally a couple days after Christmas. It's supposed to be cold, and this, honestly, is the time of year, wintertime, when guys used to think fishing was at its toughest. I mean, when the water temperature would get down there into the lower, not lower 50s, lower 40s, even up into the upper 30s, guys just thought you couldn't catch bass. Well, the whole deal with wintertime fishing now is, honest to goodness, it may be some of the most productive time of the year now that we have forward-facing sonar and live scope. Wintertime can be one of the most incredible times of the year to fish, not only to catch a lot of fish, but some of the biggest fish of the year. And the biggest key to winter, in my opinion, is the creek channels. I've talked about points and creek channels. To me, in the winter, the main river channels and all of these creek channels are gonna be the main focus in the winter. Anytime I'm winter fishing, I'm literally going to live scope out here in the main part of the river channel, or I'm gonna follow where these drains go back into these creeks. A lot of times, these little connections, these places where 2 creek channels intersect, those will be areas where you really find the bait and the fish. And don't be afraid to look deep. I mean, a lot of times, 30, 50, 60 foot deep isn't uncommon to find these fish. Wherever the bait's at is where these fish are gonna be. These places like this in the wintertime become really, really key. You've got a creek channel here, you've got a creek channel here, and then you've got this ridge or this point that runs out here that's got some high spots on it. But you've got a really steep section right here. So what it allows those fish to do is push bait up against that steeper underwater bank. Bait is gonna be the big, big key when it comes to wintertime fishing. So basically when you get into that wintertime, you can see I am literally dead in the middle of this creek channel right here. And what I'm looking for is bait pods that are at least that big or bigger. I mean, you're not looking for little bait pods, you're looking for mass schools of fish. And generally in the wintertime, if you will just focus on following these creek channels, these main river channels, you're gonna land on bait. And once you get around a bait in the wintertime, you're definitely gonna be able to catch them. Let's break down what baits we're gonna catch them on. One thing that I've figured out in the wintertime, you're gonna have a group of fish that live relatively shallow, and then you're gonna have another group of fish that live really, really deep. Number one for catching those shallower fish is gonna be a McStick 110. You're fishing it around bait balls that are high in the water column. These fish will push up in the wintertime a lot. They'll get under that high bait, and that's when the McStick 110 really shines, something you can get them to react to. It's just all about getting somewhere where you get a little bit of surface disturbance just to break the surface up. And I mean, generally takes a little bit of a ripple to make it happen. If they're up on the bank and they're still up there eating, like I said, there's always a group of fish that stay shallow. Rock crawler 55 is a bait I'm definitely gonna have again. I mean, no surprise. But colors are gonna change a little bit. I mean, I like something that's really opaque and natural looking, like just this natural crog. You know, it's just typical crawfish color in the Ozarks. And then I do still want to mix something in with red, but you can see this is Red River Craw. It was a Bass Pro Shop exclusive color. This is going to be a bait that I have in my hand. When you talk about fishing for those deeper fish, the big thing about catching them on these lakes in the winter is getting the bait down to them. But the head size, don't let it bother you. This is actually a 5/8 or a 3/4 ounce head. Bomb it down to them, get it in front of them. Generally, you can just stop it and hold it and they'll come get it. Little fat dude just been eating like crazy down there. Just a little big bite jerk minnow, little 4-inch jerk minnow, catching them big old spots on it. There's nothing funner. And then if you're not able to catch them on a minnow style bait and you get one of those cloudy, dark, nasty days, a lot of times a 5/8 ounce big bite McMoney jig, but with a trailer like a twin tail. I want something that's got a little bit more action, but has a subtle action. That's gonna be a great bait to drag around in the wintertime to catch some of those more lethargic fish that we normally typically think of when you talk wintertime fish. Okay, everybody, I really hope my breakdown and just general knowledge of Norfork Lake has really opened your eyes up to what this lake has to offer. And the next time you get over here, it makes your experience a lot better.